make sure first which is behaving alright with steam and all that. And then you start oiling it up, getting it ready for the road, and make sure that if there's any volunteers around, you get them to clean the brasses and all that.
Well, it takes some time, an hour and a half or so, because parts of it get very hot. The first piece I clean, which is the dome, that gets quite warm quite quickly. And then the whistles. Then you work down and you do the paintwork, the tanks on the side of the cab. And then you, usually in the evening after the journey, we do the frames afterwards, before we put it to bed.
It was just a job to me, like, you know, I just came here as a job, like as a mechanic. I've stayed here ever since. I've been here for 6 years. Well, you're not doing the same old thing, you know, day in, day out, like these factories. There's something live in a steam engine.
Start about 7:15, 7:45. One has to do the work of cleaning up the station before the public arrive. Sweep out the office, generally clean the place up, pick up all the rubbish, and then I usually go home for breakfast and come out again about 9:15. And I usually open up with control about 10 o'clock. And then I'm ready to accept any work strains that might come down. And of course the first passenger is up here at 10:53. And during this drought I have to go up and have a look at the water system to see whether we've got any or whether we haven't. One can only let it go down to about 6 inches over the outlet. Otherwise, with the low pressure, if it gets an air bubble in it, it'll airlock. So one has to, when it drops to a certain level, shut everything off and try and let the water build up again. for instance, last night I shut everything off, the cafe, the house, and the engine tank after it had filled, and we gained just 5 inches of water in the night. Well, that's something, but of course that 5 inches only represents about 150 gallons perhaps, which goes nowhere, of course, when you're filling up engines. Unfortunately, the toilets have had to be closed because they get through such astronomical amounts of water, and it's come to the point now where either we run trains or we've got toilets, and in my opinion, running trains is more important, inconvenient though it may be to the public. My uncle, John Wells, was Bwlch's chief civil engineer, and he built all the 15-inch gauge railways in this country, that were built by Narrow Gauge Railways Limited, with the exception, of course, of the Romney Highland Dymchurch, which was after his time. He moved to Fairborn in 1918 or thereabouts, and converted the Fairborn horse tramway into 15-inch gauge steam railway, and he stayed there as general manager till 1935. In 1958, I went there as a full-time driver, and I stayed there till 1968, when I came here. All the coach parties either join or alight from trains here. Well, there is only 2 minutes allowed for down trains to get away, and it's very important to have the people on the platform with their tickets checked and standing as nearly as possible in the correct place for their reserved accommodation when the train comes in. Of course, it doesn't always work like that. When parties arrive late, we give them a minute or two, and then if they haven't arrived, well, unfortunately, we can't wait. But oddly enough, we had one the other day. It turned up 2 hours late, and they caught the train 2 hours later than they should have done. But they didn't seem to mind, and we fitted them in. To me, steam, of course, is everything. I spent years on steam myself, and I still get to, after the hundreds of trains that go through here, I still love to stand on the platform to listen to an up train coming through up the gradient through the woods, whistling for the crossings. And after the train's gone, sometimes when the wind's in the northeast, I can hear him roaring away up to the tunnel, departing in the distance.
The niggers in the woodpile as a CEGB who, well, way back in the late 1940s, flooded part of the line, and ever since then there have been various ideas and plans how to get round this lake. We came up with a thing which is a spiral. Real classic example, of course, is a Himalaya and Darjeeling Railway, where you have literally two, one on top of another spiral, and the front of a train can be seen going over the back end of the same train. But what it involves is you go around in a dirty great circle, going nowhere except just gaining height. I came onto the scene in 1968 as a volunteer, and in late 69 was asked if I would take on the job as a full-time person looking after it, because the whole thing had grown so big. The coordination was required, because half the time people were undoing what the previous lot had done. I think I managed to do it fairly reasonably. You have to be a bit of an amateur psychologist. The vast majority of people who come and work on the deviation don't really know what they're letting themselves in for. They say, right, we're going to build a railway this weekend, but they've got no real idea what's involved, and it is only when you give them a pick and a shovel and they loaded the first couple of skips and they're getting a bit shattered, especially if they're office workers and the like, you say, well, I'm expecting at least another dozen of those today, that it really gets through to them just what is involved. When it was decided to do the west side route, it involved building a tunnel 300 yards long, 285 metres I should say, because everything on the west side route is metric, but I know it, I'm still an imperial man. 300 yards long. We looked at it with a view, in fact, to getting a contractor, and then various members of the society who are by trade and profession tunnellers wrote to us and said, well, why didn't we have a bash at doing it ourselves? We said, well, put your money where your mouth is. And we've duly now got 3 people who are coming to drive the tunnel for us, who are professional miners, and I and my 2 Irks and the volunteers will be the backup people getting rid of all the muck when it comes out of the tunnel, providing all the facilities and services to keep them going and hard at it.
I think it's something that you just grow up with. You play with trains when you're a lad. You see trains, BR trains, and you say, well, yes, I'm going to be an engine driver when I grow up. And you get to about 15, 16, leave school, you get other interests. And then suddenly, this happened to me. I used to go grass track racing, and I had a bad accident one time. And I started railway modelling, which I hadn't done since I was about 10 or 12. And I got back into the, well, virtually toy trains and built my own scenery. It was a bit too fiddly, small gauge. And just about that same time I came down to Wales on holiday, and I saw the railway and had a ride on it, and ended up asking if it was possible to come down for a week's holiday volunteering. That's how it all started. I had an inkling towards being an engine driver, and when I got down here I found out it wasn't as simple as being an engine driver, stepping on the footplate and away you go. I started off working in the shops, and I ended up as a trainee driver, driving on all the engines but the double engine. I was out on Blanche, Mountaineer and Linda, and I was thought that when I first came down here I'd be a standby driver to cover most of the engines, and then the general manager left the footplate last year and I was kept on Linda, and I've ended up looking after Linda since and driving Linda. I think the whole drive is interesting, depending on what load you've got or whether you're running late. You're fighting the elements all the time. If you happen to have a slight shower, the tendency is on the Penryn engines is to slip at the slightest shower, and you're trying to beat the slip and to keep time, get the train into the stations on time. You feel very proud, very proud.
This train has connections at Tannable for Reckless Lake Gardens. Booking service is available in the rear 4 coaches at the 12:15 limited call.
I've always been interested in railways, and I used to be a member of the Sheffield Model Railway Club, and the chairman of that club was also an active what we call deviationist. He used to come up here every weekend and throw a few rocks around, you know. And a group of us came down together in 1966. After that, I tried for better things, you know. I started doing a bit of permanent way work, and then a fortnight summer holiday. I went on the engines as a volunteer fireman and carried on doing that basically for 4 years until I came down here for a full-time job. This place is a bit of a novelty at the moment because it's only been open about 3 weeks, and it's the first signal box that we've got where it is actually a proper signal box, where the levers are actually inside the building itself. You know, everywhere else is simply a ground frame, and so there aren't any more signal boxes apart from this one, so this is quite a novelty to be able to work this. No doubt the novelty will wear off before very long. Once the 2 trains are here, it's up to me as signal and to get them away as quick as I can, you know. So it's a continual rush around, and then you just sit down and do nothing for an hour, and then do another 30 seconds, and that's all there is to it, you know. In the hour's break, you know, well, today, for instance, I've got through a whole rail news, the Daily Mail, Daily Express, and 2 chapters of London Termini. The railway's caught at the moment between what it used to be, the sort of mass volunteers and very enthusiastic sort of people around here, to now it's grown very much. It's half commercial, and it's bound to be commercial before long. It's got to stay in existence, really. So you find all over the railway at the moment that there's this sort of queer atmosphere of half enjoying yourself and half looking forward expectantly to what it's going to be in 3 years' time. But I can't think of anything better that I want to do at the moment. That's the best way I can sum it up. If I did leave here, it'd only be to go to another railway of this nature, another preserved line.
Steam has got a real interest for me. I like all forms of steam power. I like stationary steam power, traction engines. Anything to do with steam interests me, and I just wouldn't put myself out to drive a diesel.
Well, with steam, you've got such things as water level to consider and boiler pressure. And you drive according to the conditions of that engine on any particular trip. No two trips are the same. I love the things. Yeah, I like them all. They're all smashing little engines.